Welcome back to 3-Point Firefighter. I've been gone for a few weeks, and you're probably wondering, where in the world is that beautiful man, Jake Barnes? Well, first off, nobody said hero, but thank you very much. I've been out teaching. I've been on a whirlwind tour of the United States teaching with the ISFSI, but I'm back now, and it's time to get back to business with the podcast. So my first guest is going to be Erin McGruder. Now, while I've missed a few podcasts, they've added something new to the software I use where they have AI read the introduction, and it's supposed to sound like me. It does sound like me, but see if you can tell the difference on this next intro. And by the way, I'll be using these all the time because they make me laugh. Erin McGruder has been a firefighter EMT for more than 20 years. She serves as a planning team manager for a FEMA USAR. She is a planning team manager and retired canine handler for a state USAR team. McGruder specializes in curriculum and instructor development as a fire service, state training, agency staff member for nearly a decade. She holds a master's degree in public affairs and is currently studying educational psychology and adult learning at the doctoral level. McGruder is a National Fallen Firefighter Foundation Fellow and volunteers as a state advocate for the Everyone Goes Home program. Additionally, she serves as a director at large for the International Society for Fire Service Instructors. And with that, your adult learning webinar, I loved it.
I'm sorry.
No, I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I've got all kinds of questions on it because it's fascinating to me. And for everybody that's listening right now, I'm going to put the link down for Erin's webinar on adult learning. And it is amazing. It's about 40 some odd minutes, almost an hour. And it's on ISFSI. So if you're a member of ISFSI, it's free, which is nice. I like free. And if you're not, it's only $50. This is keynote quality, FDIC quality. So it's worth seeing. And I know you're tough on yourself, but people will watch it and they'll go, you know what? Barnes is right for once. So Miss McGruder, how are you?
Doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I had a power outage right at the last minute. So if you see me, I couldn't fix my notes in front. So like I'm paying attention to you. So if you see me look to my right, that's not me looking at artistic websites that I like to look at peruse from time to time. It is looking at notes. So
I trust you. I don't know why.
As well you should. As well you should. Oh, the new shirt. I'm glad you brought that up. There'll be a link down in the bio of all my new stuff that in my store. Cheap plug, by the way, right?
Okay, so if you see me looking this way, it's me already ordering the shirt. Because
I could see who orders my shit, and if now I'm kind of upset if you don't. I met you on a curriculum development team. Mm-hmm. I've heard your name before, but never really met you. I go to Kansas. Mm-hmm. And instantly, I feel like you're tier one friend. Instantly, when I met you, you tolerated me for 3 damn days. 3 damn days of me being me. I might have had 1 or 2 beers.
I don't know if that's a sign of my childhood trauma, but yeah, it was a great experience. I loved it.
So we were in Missouri. We were actually in, what was the name of I forget.
So what part of Missouri we did. Okay, we did predominantly. We were in Kansas City, Kansas, for the ISFSI engine company operations and water mapping class. We did. I don't know if it was legal, take you across the state line a time or two for evening activities, but
yes. And you work for Kansas City, what KU? But tell me what KU is.
Okay, so KU is University of Kansas. That's the host entity in the state of Kansas for the state training agency. So where I work is a little bit bipolar. We're a state agency, but we're housed in a local university. It sounds a little weird, but what our responsibilities are is we are state statute responsible for training throughout the state of Kansas. We supplement training that local departments can't provide for themselves. And then we also do our IFSAC and Pro Board certification for the state. So we get to travel the state. We're a mobile-based entity where other states are fixed site. And so we get to go everywhere and talk to everyone and see just about every side of the fire service.
Well, you also deal with Casey Moe, though, right?
Yes, yeah. So Kansas City, Missouri, we don't serve them officially, but our programming is open to out-of-state participants. So we get some folks from KCMO. I personally have ties to KCMO because of my background with Missouri Task Force 1, which is a FEMA Urban Search and Rescue Task Force. When I came
Mhm.
on, we had a large contingent of Kansas City, Missouri firefighters who were our rescue specialists, our trainers, guys who had initially deployed to 9/11 and Katrina. And so I've got some roots with some folks in that organization as well.
Yeah. So you did your what were you a canine handler? Is that what it was?
Yeah, so I'm officially calling myself retired canine handler now. For the longest duration, I've been either what we call technical information specialist or planning team manager. I'm the person with the clipboard that makes sure that we are driving where we're supposed to drive to and our receipts get turned in. And then I'm going out in the field and documenting our operations, making the maps, reporting back to IST. I'm one of the people responsible for all the information flow on the team. Now, stop
That
me if you've
that
heard
sounds
this,
so exciting.
right? Uh,
Paperwork.
um,
Yay.
It is one of my super skills to do spreadsheets. Um, but if you've heard of this, we sometimes have staffing issues and everybody has to wear multiple hats. So where I started
Right.
in USAR with Missouri, everybody's cross-trained as a rescue specialist first. I also
Mhm.
got cross-trained as a canine handler. And then when I had to choose canine or plans, I stuck with plans with Missouri, and then I took my dogs and I started working for the state of Kansas as a canine handler there for their state team. So
So you got the
I
best of both worlds.
I
You got
did.
your spreadsheets and a puppy dog.
I get to play both positions. So now that I'm retired, retired both of my dogs. Now I'm a planning team manager for both teams.
So
Which
where are the two
sounds
dogs?
the two dogs are in the other room right now because they've got to go
Okay, so you
behave.
kept them.
Oh yeah, they're my
Okay.
dogs. So majority of canine handlers in the urban search and rescue environment when I started, we own our own dogs, we pay for our own training. I, we were very largely independently funded, and then we make ourselves available to the team. In some teams, that format has changed where the teams procure the dogs and they're starting to do more firefighter or fire department based dogs. And so
Mhm.
those get funded by the entities, the agencies. But most of my stuff was all self funded. So uh, my dogs basically all started here. So a couple of our dogs
So
we
they're
bred.
both Chihuahuas, if I'm correct, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. They're Chilweenies, if you will. It's a very delicate cross.
That's true. And my wife calls me that sometimes. I don't know what that means, but it is.
I don't think that's what she calls you. No. So a lot of, and I know you guys didn't tune in to talk about dogs today, and this is slippery slope once you get me going. A lot of dogs in the
Both of them did. Both of them did tune in to hear it. Yes.
well, that would be my mom. Hi, mom. So so most dogs are working type dogs, like you see a lot of labs, a huge prevalence of labs. You get a lot of the Dutch Shepherds, Belgian Malinois. Those are really the most typical dogs right now. I did border collies because I'm more of a
Ooh.
horseback riding, working cattle background, and I knew border collies before anything else. So that was my poison.
So how many? Okay, all right. Let's go back. You got your first dog, and you've trained it to the level to where you're working. What
Mhm.
is like the daily routine or weekly routine to keep that dog up to snuff? And by the way, what's the dog's name? It says saying the dog. I want to say the name.
So my first certified dog was, I call him Cutter. His name's Cutthroat Kid. So the first 2 to 3 years are really intense. With border collies, fun fact, you have to actually kind of teach them to bark on cue because they're a quiet breed to begin with, and so it's just
Ooh,
tormenting them a little bit to find what game elicits them to cue or to bark, and that's what we call our train final response. And so then we have to pair that train final response up with a behavior, which is run and hide. So the early stages are, I'm going to take the toy and I'm going to make them bark, and somebody's going to hold the dog, and then somebody's going to run with the toy and hide behind a tree. And when the dog gets there and barks, which is what we want him to do, we give him the toy and we play with him. So the fun thing is everything we do to train the dog is a game to the dog. It's an elongation of the game
right.
over time until they're working independently. And so the first 2 or 3 years, which is usually takes 2 years to certify them, get them to that type 1 status, you're training multiple times a week, if not daily. After that, you go into kind of a maintenance, you start doing more technical problems and whatnot. But what I learned is you want to throttle back the difficulty on their joints over time so you're not killing them in training. You don't wear them out. My dogs currently are 13 and 14. My 13-year-old just came up with AFib. She's got a cardiac issue, so she's retired. My 14-year-old is having joint and spinal issues, so he's retired now too.
So just to let you know, I have AFib and I also have joint issues. So I guess by the transitive, I'm two dogs.
I still love my dogs more. Sorry, Jake.
Fine, but you have met me now, and I get it. It seems like it'd be so. Go ahead. You go.
Oh, I was going to say
you're the guest. You go.
Well, that's the fun thing is when I tell people, "Oh yeah, I have a dog who has AFib," like, "Oh, I didn't know dogs got AFib," which is really a great example of what I spend a lot of my time teaching because I do a lot of instructor development. Is we don't translate new information or known information to novel situations until we're confronted with it. So when I tell somebody, "Oh yeah, I have a dog with AFib," and I go, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." I'm like, yeah, it makes sense when you have to think about it. But if we say, "Oh yeah, I have dog, it has, my dog has a really elevated 300 beats per minute. They're, doing this, this, and this," people don't just instinctively go, "Oh, is your dog an AFib?" until they're confronted with it. So translation of knowledge is something I always play with.
And how do you know a dog has AFib? Like for me, I can feel it. I know it. How did you know your dog had AFib?
So kind of just the same way that you would look at an adult and go, something's not right with you. So in this particular case, she was listless, she was restless, she wasn't eating, she was using her whole body to breathe, very, very high repetition of respirations, very high frequency of heart rate, not acting herself. She doesn't, it's kind of like dealing with a farmer when they don't feel good. You just kind of have to read the symptoms because they're not going to self-identify and go to the doctor. So how you really know a dog has AFib is you take it to the University Vet Center and you pay a whole lot of money. That's how you know a dog has AFib.
Okay, so yeah, it's like you don't look at it and go, "I bet you're an AFib. You got a little bundle branch block up that."
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
that is great. Yeah. So, we talked about earlier, about an hour ago when we started the show, about meeting on a curriculum development team for the ISFSI. Let's see, you're director at large. I got to look at my notes. You're director at large.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about that. Tell me about how you got involved with the ISFSI and what the director at large does.
So it's how I got involved with the ISFSI is how most people, I think, get involved with the ISFSI. There's a curriculum or there's a networking activity and somebody drags you into it. I've had ISFSI classes, and typically when you sign up for an ISFSI class, you get the membership. And then most folks make the mistake and they don't do anything with it past there. In my case, I was at FDIC, and by nature of what I was doing at the time, I knew a lot of ISFSI members. And so honestly, I snuck into the social without paying the social fee. I know, right? And oh yeah, she's definitely going to watch your podcast, so I feel safe saying that here. But I stuck into the social and was talking to folks, and it's just one of those organizations that it's kind of cliche to say the best value is the networking, but it really is. ISFSI has a great assortment of people. The members all are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to actively learn. They're trying to actively share information. They've all kind of specialized one direction or another, and they all have an interest. And the difficulty is outside of the socials is you actually have to sign into the websites and participate there. It takes a little bit of discipline to get your full value out of your membership. You got to sign on to the website and see when the hangouts are, see when the podcasts are, the webinars are. But there's so much information, and the informal learning through the website is awesome also because folks can share lesson plans, they can share questions and concerns. It just really is a huge open phone book, if you will. And if folks don't know it, they know somebody they can ask. And so ISFI is a great organization. it was suggested to me to become a director at large, which means my region is the entire continental United States and beyond. So if a member has a question, they can reach out to me. If there's something I see that we can do better, I can suggest that a little more readily to the president and leadership. I participate in the meetings and try to help as best as I can with my local expertise to make the organization and our operations better. And so it's really been fun and engaging to be a director at large. And it's one of those organizations that I foresee being a member of as long as they'll have me. So.
Like you, I love the ISFSI. Anybody that's ever listened to my podcast, they hear me go on and on about it. Not sponsored by them. They've never asked me to say one positive thing. I just, and always, whenever I teach a class for them, there's a part in every class where we got to brag on the ISFSI.
Right.
It's my favorite part because I always say, I don't brag on the ISFSI because I work for them. I work for them because they're that good. And you touched on it with the networking, the online networking. If I need to come up with an EV policy, I don't have to start from scratch. I can post it. And I'll get reply after reply. I mean, you might even get somebody like, Chief Lieb from FDNY who's on top of this stuff, respond with some information. It's not just for instructors. It's this is turning into a commercial. I get it, but I believe in it. It's not just for instructors, and it's not just for company commanders. It's for anybody that wants to be a better firefighter and hit the accelerate button on their career, I think. But again, to your point, if you just get the membership and do nothing, waste of time. Don't worry about it. But if you want to, like I say, accelerate your career, you got to go there. Now, I've never ran for any position, but I'm retired now. I might run for something. So if I run against you for director at large, I would crush you. What do you think?
Well, you got AFib, so I don't think you could run too far. So
shit. I shouldn't have brought up. By the way, that's HIPAA. That's HIPAA. I can sue you now. Boom, boom, boom.
I'm not your medical provider.
Okay, damn it, you're good. I can see why I know you got a master's, but now you're working on your doctorate. So I guess you think you're so fancy, huh?
No, so PhD just means piled higher and deeper. That's all that means.
In debt.
So that too. So the more time I spend in academia, the more I'm a little jaded by it. And really, when I talk to people about being in a PhD program, it's just a capacity to hyperfixate on one topic more than other people. Mm-hmm. I really think that's what it comes down to.
Well, there's research too, right? If you really love the topic, then you have to do a lot of research in that topic to get your doctorate, right?
Yes, you should. Yes.
Okay, and you're doing, let's see, I'm going to get it exact right so you don't have to tell me. Educational psychology and adult learning, mm-hmm. right?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk to you about adult learning. I love adult learning, but I'm learning in my career how many, I've strung together a few things, but I can see, especially after watching your webinar, which I still think is excellent, there's so many blank spaces that I didn't fill as an instructor. So it got me thinking, if whatever success I did have, was it luck? And when I did really, really bad, then I must not have done enough adult learning. And I got to say this, your webinar, again, is fun. It's fun. You're not just sitting there reading stuff. You engage them. I love the last exercise you did, and I want to get to that later on. But when it comes to adult learning, let's say you had to come up, and I know you talk about Knowles and Brown and all, and Erickson and mm-hmm. all that. And they have their 5 this, their 8 that. What mm-hmm. would you say you've got just a couple of minutes to make an instructor better in the fire service? What are your top 5 things? I know I didn't prepare you for that one, did I?
No, this is an ambush. Yeah. So one of the first things I would tell people is, like I alluded to earlier, knowledge doesn't translate to novel implementations so much. Just because you know A and B doesn't mean you inherently know that it equals C, D, and E. So when we're teaching our folks, especially if we're teaching a fire academy, I usually use the academy explanation because that's our lowest building blocks of learning in the fire service. So if you're teaching an academy and you're day 1, you can't just tell your guys, hey, go don your PPE. Okay. They don't know what PPE is. And so we have to break those things down. And so chunking, that's number 2 that I would give you, is we have to chunk our information at the appropriate level for the receiver to receive it and apply it. So just because we tell them what PPE is, we tell them this is your SCBA, we tell them what your helmet is, we tell them what those things are, and we might do that traditional PowerPoint of this is your helmet, this is, the thermal protective properties, and, all these things. If we turn around and go, okay, don your PPE, they're probably still going to try to put their pants on without having their boots where they need it, right? Because they haven't inferred that additional knowledge that we didn't tell them. So a little bit of information does not make the full equation. We have to really chunk it down to the levels they need it.
Let me interrupt you because
Yeah.
that's what I do.
Yeah.
So, so one of the hangups that I have, and I want to say, this is why I'm interrupting you because it's right there, is having experience in the fire service, teaching new people, is I know the C, D, and E, and some part of my brain is like, how come they don't? I need to stop and realize what I have in knowledge and experience, they have none. So I have to kind of back up a bit and remember what it was like to be new, learning any new skill. So
Yeah.
I just want to throw it
Yeah.
in there so you think I'm smart.
And that's what I'll give you as my number 3, is we can only move as fast as students can learn. So if we're not giving the information in a way that they can process it and apply it and practice it and then move on to the next topic, if we just blow by it because we got 30 minutes, we need to get through 500 slides, we just wasted 30 minutes. There's no way they're going to remember any of that in a way that we actually need them to do it. So now an hour and a half later, we want them to execute, and they can't execute because we didn't actually give them the information in a digestible way that might result in durable learning, and we get mad at them. That's our fault. That's our failure as an instructor. So we need to take the time to make sure that we're getting durable learning on the building blocks of the information and application and set them up for success. If we spend that extra time up front, we're going to make it up on the back end when they sail through things with expertise. And so that's a huge component of moving at the speed of your students. And understanding what durable learning is. We don't want to just, there's kind of 2 types of tests in my world. There's the really good valid tests that match the work of what we need them to do so that when we pass the test, they're solid. And there's those BS tests that we all have encountered in our careers where, okay, we just got to get you past the test. We're going to spend the 6 months of the 3 months of the academy to get you past these state certification tests. And then when you have time to, you get back on the rigs, now forget everything we just taught you because now we have to teach you the right way to do things. Right? So that's a failure of our testing.
That's bullshit, but yes.
Yeah. I call those BS tests. Absolutely. And so if you're confronted with a BS test, first and foremost, try to fix it. Make the test match the job. I'm going to give you that as takeaway number 5, even though we're not quite to 5. But that's the biggest takeaway I can give you, is make the test match the job so that the entire instructional period, we're just focusing on what I'm going to call this number 4, the 3 types of information: what they need to know, what's nice to know, and we're not wasting any of our time on what's nuts to know. Because if we have to teach our Firefighter 1s the entire essentials book to pass that random multiple choice test, which has never put out a fire at 3 a.m., we're wasting all that time because they're not going to remember it. They're not going to be able to apply it. All that time on slides is just a frustration for the instructors and the students. And then they've got to get out on the rigs and operate in the field without being properly equipped.
So you just said something that it's just so aggravating for me. Is no good instructor likes to make training scars. I mean, sometimes we do by accident, but what drives me nuts is when I would have in the state of Indiana, I'd have to teach firefighter 1 and 2, and I would get to things that were in IFSTA that I absolutely do not believe in or is absolutely ridiculous. But you have to teach them it so they can have a test to pass it. And then at the same time, you have to teach them that, hey, what I'm teaching you isn't real. And the example I like to give is they still teach to heal a ladder from underneath. Like they have to, that is a thing you have to do. And I totally disagree with it. You should heal a ladder, so where you can look up and not get hit in the head with stuff. And that's just one of a million examples. Creating those training scars, especially to a brand new recruit, what is your recommendation for that? Because if you have to teach to the state curriculum, but for a fact several things are not current, up to date, or even safe, how do you do that?
So first and foremost, I encourage you to engage your state. because that's where the problem is, and that's where the problem truly gets solved. There are states that do testing without multiple choice testing. There's a couple different testing methods that are used that have been used for a number of years. If your state doesn't have the capacity to switch over, mental or emotional or staffing capacity to switch over, that's one thing. Fixing the test is the big deal. That's it's kind of like water on fire. Putting the fire out solves all problems. Fixing the test is the first and foremost, the greatest bang for the buck you can get there. When you can't fix the test, and I've worked in systems that have had that, as an instructor, spend your time on what your guys need to know. Spend your time teaching your guys and your gals what they need to do the job, to be safe, to do these things that we really want to secure primacy on. We want to have recency on. We want to have that really durable, ingrained, reflexive knowledge of. Spend your time there. And then, like all good college students, right for the test, crash the BS information. Cram what you need to know for that multiple choice test, because they're not going to remember it with longevity ever anyhow. So don't spend your longevity trying to build it. For your skills, pull them aside ahead of time. We're like, look, I know we taught you to stand back and use the reach of the stream and hydraulically stir the dumpster fire. And I realize that they're going to give you a pony pike pole, and they want you to reach in over, break the plane of the dumpster and stir it. You're going to do that today. You're going to do that once. You're going to pass the test. You're going to never do that again, or I myself will kill you. One of those things. So be frank with your people. And that's the great thing about adult learners. You can tell them straight up what the game is, because just because they're leaving your academy and they have to take this test once, hopefully just once, they're going to deal with that same state agency later. And so they need to know, hey, focus on the bread and butter, focus on the stuff that's going to keep us safe and keep us professional in our job, and then figure out the stuff in the margins as you need it, and then tank it if it's not what we want to do.
I hear what you're saying. I like it. I like how you just kind of said, "Hey, just change the test with the state, like it's the easiest thing in the world." But you did offer an alternative, and I appreciate that. But no, it's almost impossible. But when tell me, so as an instructor, which has probably been my favorite part of my career has been being an instructor, for somewhat selfish reasons, because every time I teach, I learn something. Yes. And not only is adult learning different, so teaching adults and younger people, two different things. You can talk about it in your excellent webinar. I want everybody to go check it out. But here's the problem. You got to know your audience. I learned that fairly early on as an instructor in the fire service. You got to know your audience. An example would be where I used to work. People saw training as an obstacle and not an opportunity. And then you go to, say, the ISFSI classes that I teach, and people that come there because they want to learn. So you have that dichotomy of have to do this and then want to do this. Now, here's what I'm getting at with what you said and what I'm saying: generational awareness. Where does generational awareness fit in? Because ever so often, if you're in this business for very long, you're going to see multiple generations, not just what people like to talk about, Gen X, Gen Z, and all that, but within the fire service, I believe there's a different generational awareness as well. So how do you tie generational awareness in the fire service with the different types of audiences?
So the great thing about the term generations is it refers to a group of people. And so it might give you cues into the behaviors of an individual, but it doesn't really give you a roadmap to a certain person. And we kind of see generations isn't necessarily defined by year of birth, as it's often referred. It's more access to information. And so what they're saying now in research is that the generation cohorts, where it used to be 20 years was a generation, those time spans are getting more compressed, and generations are getting more narrowly banded, because information is traveling more fast to individuals, and we're processing information more quickly. So with that said, for instance, when I say generations not tied to year of birth, but then I make a year of birth reference, folks who are born in rural environments that have slower move of information, they tend to associate with the older generation types, because the information just hasn't reached them. They might have been born in the year 2000, but they still have those older influences and older behaviors. They might still say sir and ma'am. They might still know how to use hand tools. They might still, use power tools on a regular basis. So we would equate them more as the Generation X stereotype, but they're actually more millennial or Gen Z by birth year. So those are things to be a little concerned with. But it's more that information flow, the speed of information that's reached people, that I think is the biggest reference that we have in the fire service. For instance, a lot of our curmudgeons that we're going to see in the back of our classrooms, the ones that sit back and say, "This is stupid. I don't know why I'm here. I never learn anything." Right? Have you met that
Right.
guy? Because I've been that guy a time or two.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
a lot of the times those folks are frustrated because the antiquated training and learning that they've received, especially through high school and middle school, didn't serve their needs because they're undiagnosed ADD or ADHD or undiagnosed dyslexia or undiagnosed dyscalculia. And they literally have had learning barriers. And now that it's gone undiagnosed, they just are resigned to the fact that they're bad students and training is stupid and this is impossible. And so what we need to do for those folks is help move them out of that standard format that doesn't serve them, the sitting in the back of the classroom with that passive PowerPoint lecture going on. We need to move out to the drill field, get hands-on, focus on what we actually need them to do, and teach them in what's called domain of application. Instead of teaching you in a classroom to go out and put water on fire, let's just take you out and show you how to put water on fire. And let's get really good at putting water on fire. Well, training's not stupid then, because then it all makes sense. There's context they can see and relate to. And so
What
when
about
folks,
but
go
what
ahead.
about the sequencing though? You were just talking about you got these older heads that are not enjoying the PowerPoints or enjoying,
Mm-hmm.
the QR codes to FSRI. So how do we bridge that gap with less classroom and more hands-on if in fact they need more of the baser knowledge before you move them out? That seems like it would be very difficult as an instructor if your class is full of, say for example, you got the people in the back, but you also got the guys up front that are like
Uh-huh.
dying to have knowledge. How do you mix all of that in and come out with a nice little cake of knowledge for everybody?
But do
Call it
they
a cake
really
by the
need
way.
all that knowledge up front? Do they have to have all those words in their head?
I'm gonna push back. You ready for this? I'm gonna push back. Here
Uh-huh.
we go. Because you were there in Missouri and you
Mm-hmm.
saw that engine ops is a lot of data
A
from the
lot of data.
studies. Okay.
Yes.
The end game is wonderful. When you go out and you throw the water, you see where the water's going, you water map,
Uh-huh.
it just blows your mind. So let's use that as an example. Or are you saying stuff like that is the white noise on the bell curve and not the bell curve?
So with the engine company operations, it's a great example because we do a mix of traditional and we do a mix of innovative instruction. And so what we see in that traditional is we bring folks in, we sit them in PowerPoint, we give them all this heavy knowledge. We show them awesome videos, we give them awesome statistics, we give them great information. The students who take notes, that they participate in this, they translate it to their own words, they record those notes for later, and then later they review their notes and discuss their notes with somebody else, they're going to learn the material. For the folks who don't do those steps, they're probably just going to be like, it's going to wash over them. They're going to have a really nice experience, and then they're going to go outside in the yard and play. That's kind of our
Mhm.
traditional learning format, right? But what we do that's really innovative is when we go out in the training field and we spray water and we talk about the water mapping up the rafters and everything else, we've got these fabulous posters, right? That we have out
Marcotte
there,
posters.
the Marcotte posters, right? So we have these great
Mhm.
posters and illustrations so that as we're doing the techniques in the field, we can then reference the information from the PowerPoint that's relevant to that application in that station, right?
Mhm.
So what we do in that case is we're giving them psychomotor skills. And this becomes I steal this from Aaron Fields. He said this recently, and I love this quote. We give them context on which to hold the information. Okay, we give them a psychomotor skill framework that the information is then tied to. So if we actually go out to the training field and we start them very scripted of, you're going to arrive on scene, spot your apparatus. You're going to remove your seatbelt. You're going to gather your gear. You're going to use 3 points of contact and dismount the apparatus, right? If we give them this A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus the psychomotor skill steps, and we teach them that sequence. As they learn that sequence and the sequence becomes repetitive, now when we give them little macro doses of information along the way, of you're using 3 points of contact because, you know, if it's test question, if they actually need to know the information and we give it to them as they're performing their skill, it's actually going to encode that pairing of muscle movement and knowledge will encode much better than if we gave it to them in a PowerPoint and then gave them an application disjointed from each other.
So here's my question though. Isn't that learning a language phonetically? You know, like go to Italy and you just learn how to say the words to get to the bathroom, but you don't know, you're not conjugating a verb or hopefully you're not dangling a participle. But wouldn't that, so are you saying that's good enough, or are you saying, because to me that seems a little dangerous, and obviously I'm not at your level, but to me that seems dangerous, where you got the people in the class that aren't learning the important data that flows into the actual hands-on, or is the hands-on just enough to make a better firefighter? Am I making that clear? I don't know that I am.
Yeah, no, you are. But the great question, the great point is that until they can do the psychomotor skills, they probably can't process the information anyhow. So just because they know this percentage of this statistic doesn't mean they can go out and operate at 3 a.m. In Mrs. Smith's yard, right? What do we need them to do when they get on the trucks? Know the statistic or operate in the field?
Oh, that's good. That's a really good point. And hopefully, well, using the class that we're talking about, they get a free USB drive with all the information. So hopefully they take that, they do the psychomotor stuff in real life, and then they go back and then apply backwards, sort of.
Yeah,
okay, I get
and
that.
that
makes sense.
That'll build the retrieval or the encoding into the information for them. But then as they apply it and teach it, that retrieval and repetition, that's what really facilitates the learning for the individual. And like everything else in the fire service, in K through 12 education and higher education, and any other job on the job training, learning doesn't happen in just one session. You know, we don't just go and do firefighter 1 and then we never train on firefighter 1 again, right? We're supposed to iteratively train on it for the rest of our career. So, you know, what's the true scope of a firefighter 1? What's their job? Can you boil it down to 1 or 2 statements? What's our firefighter 1 do?
Firefighter 1?
Yeah, what's that guy do?
Just help the community in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, but what's that look like? What's an actionable task that we're going to give that guy?
Okay, so that would be being able to get on the truck and know what the equipment, hose, everything is. So when they go to work, they apply the right tool for the right app for the right situation.
And how much latitude do we give our new guy out of the academy, fresh guy out of the academy? We put him on the truck. How much decision making does he actually get to do on his own, or she, I should say?
Very little, I'd say.
Right. So what's he really get to do? He gets to follow orders. Become
an automaton.
Right. Follow orders, spray water, move heavy things. Right. Maybe a couple other things, but not a whole lot of complexity to that job. We make this mistake in thinking we want to produce a 30-year firefighter, the guy with all the 30-year experience. We want to make a great company officer in our Firefighter 1 Academy. They can't get there. We don't process information like that. They can become a really great Firefighter 1. And then as a great Firefighter 1, they can study and become a great Firefighter 2. And as a great Firefighter 2, they can become a great instructor and then an officer. And then we have those pro-qual levels designed for a reason, because all learning is iterative. We have to do repetitions. We have to have learning plateaus and then escalate, and learning plateaus and escalate. So when we say, hey, we need this guy to know all this information, we got a 4-hour class. Okay, is that really need to know information within that 4 hours? Or is that information nice to know, or some of it even nuts to know? And what we really need them to do is perform the psychomotor skill and understand when the officer asks them to do this, this is how they execute it.
So let's go back. Okay, I see what you're saying. Let's go back to the generational stuff, right? So I see what you're saying, but going back to the generational stuff, it's been my experience that the newer people like the why, right? So when I first came on in 19, it was
you still said 19. It's bad enough.
Yeah, I know, right? It's but it was clean the shitters. Do it was exactly like you said. You know, it was like you don't think, you do.
Mhm,
And then now the new account, you can't use that approach, right?
mhm,
So it seems like sort of in conflict with one another when it comes to to adult learning. That
mhm,
you can't. I mean, you can't give them too much freedom. The example I like to use is when an officer says on the fireground scene, "Go get me a pickhead axe," and then the
mhm,
guy goes, "Well, do you want a pickhead axe? Or you want a flathead axe? Do we bring the
mhm,
Halligan with you?" We don't have time for that, but at the same time, maybe they're seeing something that officer isn't. So
mhm.
make all that better for me. Make me
Okay,
understand. I'm from Kentucky.
okay, I'll speak slow. So, so to your first point, to your first point, these,
You're the best.
that that complaint that we have, these young blah blah blahs, they want to know why.
Mhm,
How dare they? Well, let's be honest. We wanted to know why too. We just knew we were going to get
mhm.
slapped if we asked, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So it's not that this new generation or new generations are any different from us. We're just giving them more grace. And we shouldn't be resentful that they're getting grace that we didn't have extended to us. And that's, one of those things about how we make the world a better place. Let's give each other more grace. Let's have better conversations. The great thing about training is not the emergency scene. And so during training, we set up that psychologically safe environment where we can have those conversations. When they ask that, hey, do we want a pick head axe or do we want a flat head axe in training, we can discuss those things. Another thing we can discuss is crew resource management. Are you familiar with that concept? Have you heard that? This is
Crew
a
resource management.
yes.
I mean, I think I know what you're saying, but I've got a feeling that it's way above my head. I'm thinking it's doing a lot more with a lot less. For
Okay,
example,
so the
three people engines.
right, the corporate America definition there. Well, crew resource
Okay.
management actually comes from the aviation industry. And Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Outliers, talks about an airline that was chronically crashing. And at first, they thought it was the airframe. So the stretch from modern news pop culture right now. So the airline grounded all of those airframes internationally because this airframe traditionally was going down at a higher prevalence of other airframes. When they found out it was limited to this one specific country of origin for this airline. And what it turned out was, long story short, was they had a very strong rank and file culture. So even though the co-pilot could totally realize that they are not at the island they think they are, that's not an airstrip ahead of them, that is indeed a mountain ahead of them. It's stormy weather, just absolute terrible setup. Even though the co-pilot could really know that he's about to die of imminent death because of the pilot's error, they still make a benign statement because of their culture of, oh, it's a little darker than usual, or something like really that does not translate. Because of that rank and file
That
culture, they
mountain
weren't
sure is getting close.
yeah, right. So they weren't allowed the communication to, hey, are you sure you want to pick head X, in that emergency situation? And so crew resource management was developed that, hey, in a moment of urgency, whomever witnesses a problem has the responsibility and obligation to call the problem out, but they need to do it in a particular format. So in training, we teach them psychologically safe. Let's have these conversations. We can stop the evolution, talk about why a pick head axe versus a flat head axe. But then when we get on scene, if it meets this criteria, we want you to talk to the person by their name, identify clearly what your concern is, identify what you think the outcome will be, identify a solution if you have one. And so when people in that rapid response mode in the theater of operations, when we talk to each other with that format and we all know what that format is and recognizes it, then we know to take a beat and go, oh no, you're right. I do want the flathead axe. Thank you. So we can treat that differently, but we have to practice that in training in order to have that response there. And then we also caveat that with, hey, unless you see A, B, C, unless you see a contraindication to the order I give you, execute the order and we'll talk about it in the after action. So it's just establishing those clear expectations and having the mechanism to execute whether the algorithm leads us left or right.
that seems like it makes me think of just communication in general because the NIOSH 5, the NIOSH
Hmm.
fives, one of the big ones is communication.
Oh,
So
huge.
I guess, yeah. So I feel like that's what we're getting at here is A, communicating correctly, and B, knowing where and how to communicate, to your point. I think
Yeah.
that's amazing. You know what you remind me of this whole time, um, when I met you, and then I saw the again fantastic webinar. You were so my favorite like instructor for instructors is Forrest Reader, right?
Hmm.
I've got two now. I've got you and
Oh,
Forrest. And I mean that. I mean that. It's. I'm not just stroking a guest here, but the way he gets information across, the way he makes training fun, the way he breaks it down for all the different learners, you do the same thing. And I hope people run, don't walk to not only see this, but see whatever else you're doing when it comes to teaching us how to be better instructors. Because ultimately, I think instructors are the sail on the boat, right? And the
oh
wind.
yeah.
They're what pushes everything forward. And if we're just playing the guessing game, which I did for several years when I first got promoted to the training officer, then you're wasting your time. Going back to ISFSI and all that stuff, there's so much great information to make you a better instructor. And I think better instructors definitely equal better fire service. My thoughts. But I
Oh,
do want to ask you something.
yeah.
I love how you said this, right? So if you're an instructor one, you know that there's cognitive learning, there's the book learning. I'm just
Hmm.
generalizing. Then you go right into your psychomotor. That's your hands-on, like you literally did that. I love the way you talked about effective. Can you tell us
Hmm.
about that?
So yeah, my shtick is cognitive is your brain, your theoretical knowledge, psychomotor is your hands, and affective is your heart. That's the attitude that we were challenged with most of our students. And we don't like to talk about our feelings ever, it seems like.
Hmm.
And so when it starts feeling warm and mushy or touchy feely, we often just write that off. Well, as an instructor
Hmm.
one or two or whomever you are in the fire service or out of the fire service, because this pertains to your home life too of teaching people, we often follow that lesson plan. We tie to that theoretical knowledge because that's the concrete thing published in the textbook. Um, and research shows that when you give somebody very specific instructions, they lose creativity. And so that's where we start just droning on and drilling and following the lesson plan verbatim and reading the slides because we have these very specific instructions. Well, that doesn't evoke anybody's emotion, positive, sometimes negative, that does. Um, but
Hmm.
until we make, you talked about the younger generations have the grace to ask why. Until we make the information relatable to them, what problem does this solve for them? Because as adult learners, we're trying to solve a problem. What problem does it solve for them? How does it make their job better? How does it make them stronger at what they want to accomplish? Until we take it to that domain, it's so much harder for them to retain and apply the information. So we've got to make
Right.
it relatable. We've got to make it where they want to apply their brain, they want to apply their hands. We want to teach these things in tandem with each other and not segregated from each other. So that's the challenge of the instructor of how do we unite the psychomotor skills with the need to know information. And it's our job to triage that, to cut out the BS, to give them the need to know, sprinkle on some of the nice to know. And because we're going to triage that and not waste their time, and we're going to teach them something that's of meaning to them, that really helps with that affective drive and keeping them engaged. Because ultimately, what we want is not just for them to pass the class, not just for them to pass the test, but to leave us and keep practicing, keep studying, keep researching, come back and ask us questions because they read something on Daily Dispatch, or they read something on the secret list, or they read something because they're out there reading and engaged with the resources within our industry, and they're coming back to have those conversations with us. You made that great point of instructors learn while teaching. Well, if we can get our students to go out and teach themselves and bring information back to us, that just ups our game completely. Because now we have listening points throughout the industry. they're going to consume more information than we can consume because they're going to be better trained to consume. Every generation consumes information faster than the preceding generation. So let's put our little hooks in there so that we can get smarter without having to work so hard as we've had to.
So tell me if I'm wrong. Would this be considered effective? So when I teach, I use one example pretty consistently, no matter what class I teach. Always try to tie it to little Johnny in his Spider-Man pajamas who just had his 5th grade birthday, right? So when we talk about water mapping and contraction of gases and all that, I always try to throw in that imagery because I feel like every firefighter has this thing about children. I don't care if you have children or don't have children. When there's something bad happened and a child's involved, you always step your game up. Would I be wrong in assuming that using that example would be a type of effective learning?
Oh, tremendously. Yeah. And the great thing of my experience of working in the academy I worked at for my department, we're volunteers. So in my volunteer academy, we might have somebody who's 17 that's about to turn 18 coming through for their firefighter 1, and we might have somebody who's 45 who's just joining the fire service. And we've got that vast array of life experience. And so when we talk to those folks who are older or more mature, if you will, we might talk about little Johnny and they might picture their own son or their own daughter, and that's their affective drive. And when we work with those 17, 18-year-olds who may or may not have children of their own, they probably have brothers and sisters. They probably have cousins. And so as we're trying to motivate them to move forward or move with purpose or whatnot, giving them the mental picture of, okay, what if your brother or sister was involved in this car accident? How would you want them handled? And it's a great corrective too, of if somebody's acting out or if somebody's got the gallows humor a little too strong and we need to pull that back, and like, okay, how would you like your family to be encountered in this kind of situation? Would you want that firefighter responding to their worst day to act that way? Or do you want them to have, and so putting it in perspective, and that's where Brunacini uses Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith at 3 a.m., that's a huge affective drive. That's trying to pull at our heartstrings. Are we serving our community? But no, I think the 5-year-old in Spider-Man pajamas is perfectly an example of affective drive, right? It should be something we can relate to.
And I think as instructors, that's how we try to convey stuff is from our experience, physically seeing and doing stuff, to hopefully they don't have to go through what we went through. But if we can make them put that thing in their head, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Another thing, because I know we're running out of time. I know you got places to go, dirt to scratch, and eggs to lay. So I'm not going to take too much more of your time.
Okay.
I am a great student of like the limbic system, amygdala hijack, and all the how much of the brain it has to do with our training. I know it seems silly to say it that way, but if you go by, say, the electricity goes through our limbic system before it gets our prefrontal cortex. Basically, I like to describe it like it's dragging emotion first, because it's going to hit the emotional part of your brain first before it's the reasoning part of your brain. So one of the things, and I'm hoping that you can give me a couple more ideas on how to do this. If you're an instructor and you have a student that is, let's say, challenging, or maybe even just afraid of something. Let's say one of the big things that I saw a lot of firefighters struggle with was SCBA confidence courses. It's one of my favorite trainings, but it's a very tight, very constrictive thing. And I've seen several people either almost get into an amygdala hijack, or once they're in there, they get hijacked. And meaning, for those listening, fight, flight, or freeze. And you can start to tell, like when you see their eyes get real big, and then their whole personality changes. One of the things I like to do is ask them something to try to pull them into that prefrontal cortex, something to the effect of, what was the second car you owned? What was, what was the third scariest movie you ever saw? I'm less worried about the answer, but it makes them think. But then if they're really bad, they go right back into the hijack. What can we do as instructors when we see that? How can we, any other ideas to get them out of it, and any ideas how we can keep them in that reasoning part of our brain?
I don't think we have enough time to go into all my ideas, but I'll try to give you cliff notes on this. So one of the things I try to push in instructor 1 and 2 classes that I deliver is we need to focus on training with dopamine and not pushing our students with cortisol. So we want too often we make this claim that, oh, well, the fire scene is going to be chaotic. We have to prepare them for the chaos. You know, we play soundtracks of burning, screaming women, and make all these chaotic sounds, and somebody's throwing babies out the window towards them, and making these chaotic trainings that our students aren't prepared for. So that actually will shoot them into that amygdala hijacking, that cortisol overload, if you will, and pushes them into that adrenaline overload, so that it does shunt their processing of the prefrontal cortex, and they really just can't function. And so we go, oh, well, you screwed that up. We're going to do an after action. We're going to put you back into it. Well, the irony is that doesn't actually stress inoculate our people. That stress inundates our people. And so the next time that they start going through a scenario and they start feeling stressed, their body will escalate to that inundation response quicker and quicker and quicker. And we build people who are hyper reactive to stress. Okay, so we might get through it, all bleeding might stop, all fire goes out, but that wasn't executed the way that we could have executed it if we actually were calm, cool, collected, and could think through it. So first and foremost, train with dopamine. Let's set up a psychologically safe training environment where mistakes aren't ridiculed. We don't taunt people for their specific personality. We're the fire service. We give ourselves a lot of leeway to be crass and crude to each other. And I'm not saying we can't do that. I'm just saying don't make it about somebody's identity. If make it, maybe a performance issue is a performance issue. We give it 5 minutes of jokes and then we move on. But really what we want to do, we want to set up a training environment where people feel safe to make mistakes. Because if they're not safe enough to make a mistake, they're not going to try past their own capabilities to expand their capabilities, right? So when they make that mistake, let's reward them. Let's give them a high five. That was an awesome screw up. Okay, how can we fix it? And that will drive our people to be honest about their mistakes and not hiding them. And we can actually genuinely learn what we're doing wrong and how we can improve. So setting up, again, it goes back to communication. It goes back to keeping them in that prefrontal cortex and not escalating that stress level. But then if we as instructors, what I've had experience with is using a prescribed script. So as we're moving through that sequence of A, B, C, D, E, when a student makes a mistake, we don't go, whoa, stop, you idiot, you should have done it this way, blah, 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 blah. We don't go into that mode. Because when we say, whoa, stop, you idiot, cortisol, right? They're no longer thinking. Now they're going to start protecting and hiding stuff. When we give them the answer of what they should have done, they're not really learning. This is that passive PowerPoint lecture thing again. We're talking at them, not with them. So we use a prescribed script that the first thing we do is we say timeout. And when we say timeout, our students know that means freeze, tag, freeze. Whatever you're doing, stop exactly how you're doing it. So for instance, if somebody's getting ready to force a door in training and we say timeout and they're mid-swing, we want them to stop right there. The next question we as instructors ask is, what's going on? And if they're right here, they could go, oh, my hands aren't where they need to be on this tool, right? We want them to self-identify and self-diagnose. That's keeping them in the prefrontal cortex. That's giving them that macro information that we didn't spend 5 hours in PowerPoint on. That's letting them teach themselves and build confidence and autonomy and those diagnostics of their environment that they need on the fire scene when we're not there to call timeout for them. We tell them to fix it, they fix it, and they continue the rep. When we build this habit over time, when it comes to do the ladder climbs, that's going to teach them they have an aversion to heights that they didn't know about before, or the SEBA maze, we use that same language. We want to catch them before they levy on their stress level. We want them to stress themselves. They're going to stress themselves if we set up the right training, because we've taught them that they can do it. We've taught them performance-based achievements. So they're going to be pushing themselves hard enough to want to get through this without us yelling at them, without us degrading them, without us doing any of those, the house is on fire kind of things. They're going to push themselves. They're going to stress themselves. They're going to find those points of their own limitations. We use the same language with one modification. Then we say, time out, take 5 big breaths. Because if we tell them, hey, take some big breaths. What's that do to their system? What does stopping and breathing do for
Right.
us?
It makes them think. They have to actually use the front of their brain to think about that and to count to 5 and to slow their breathing and all that.
Right. So then we teach them that. We embed that in their psyche that, oh, I'm about to bloody. I'm going to stop. I'm going to take a couple big breaths. And then we use that same script of what's going on. Okay, well, we've just reset back into our prefrontal cortex. Now we can diagnose our issue. Okay, how do I fix it? Okay, I'm going to fix it and I'm going to go on. And so we actually teach them the script through repetitions and training that they can utilize when they get in those situations in the field as well. And so we actually give them the tools to manage in training for the rest of their life. Because if they start getting frustrated, if there's a road rage incident or something and they can, time out, I'm going to take 5 big breaths, that tool works everywhere.
I like it. All right. I know you got to go. I'm not going to keep you much longer. I've had a blast. Real quick, I like to end on what's the best firehouse prank that you've played on somebody or have had played on yourself?
Okay, so a little out of context because I'm a volunteer. So as volunteers, we run into people in places that aren't necessarily the firehouse. We had a mutual aid Metro fire chief was out on the street within his jurisdiction where I was walking, and they were setting up for a very large concert. And I didn't know really who was around him, but they were doing, the inspections for stages and stuff like that. And I'm about half a block down, not quite half a block down from him, whatever. And I'm walking up. And I just, want to say hi. And so at the time, dress, heels, business casual kind of thing, carrying my Starbucks tea, walking down the street and went, Chief so-and-so, I thought you knew this restraining order clearly stated. And, he's smiling, I'm, doing this. And it was just a total gag. What I didn't realize was everybody around us took it seriously. we had to have some conversations.
Oh, that's the best.
So, yeah,
those are the best ones that get the audience in there.
Yeah,
I love it.
So
I love it.
There are very unique assets to being a volunteer and having that flexibility. If I was in uniform, that would not have played well.
Sister McGruder, you are absolutely the best. I appreciate your time. I know you're limited today. Thank you for being on the show. I'll be sure to bug you often on the phone and through email. But thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. I've loved it. I'm just overjoyed that you spend the time with me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you. Today's episode is brought to you by Fire Facilities. Make training count with their custom-made, all-steel live fire training facilities. Their made-in-the-USA towers and burn rooms are the best for preparing, responding, and surviving the challenges you face every day.